Hello, everybody. This is Cynthia Butler from First Baptist Jewett. And just in case you weren't able to join us for the previous Sunday school lesson I taught, I'm going to get you caught up a little bit. We're talking about Elijah, a prophet mentioned in the Old Testament of the Bible, who was a prophet during the time of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, who were, both of them, they were bad news. They were teaching the people of Israel to worship other gods. And because of that, Elijah, who was faithful to the Lord, prayed to God, and God sent a drought, which means there was not any rain or any water due for quite a while. And Elijah went to the king Ahab and said, unless I say so, there's not going to be rain for a while. And that was because the people of Israel had turned away from God. But see, God was providing for Elijah because Elijah was living in Israel at the time. So how was he supposed to be provided for, to have food and water to drink? But God had told him to go to a brook where he was able to drink water, and he was fed by ravens who brought him food a couple of times a day. And when that brook dried up, God wasn't done providing for him. At that time, God sent him to Zarephath, where there was a widow woman, and God had told him, there's a widow woman there that I have commanded to provide for you. So when Elijah came to Zarephath and he met this woman, she was out collecting sticks with her son, and Elijah asked for her for a cup of water, which she went to go get him. But before she got into her house to get him the water, he also said, and would you also bake me a little bread? Well, this woman answered, honestly, I don't have enough. All I have left is enough to make myself and my son one little loaf of bread, and then we're going to eat it, and then we're going to die, because this woman didn't have anything left after that. And she knew that it was still the drought. There wasn't much to go around. But Elijah said, you know what? Go ahead and make me that little loaf of bread first. And after that, you can make one for you and your son too. Because God had said that the wheat that she had, the flour that she had, was not going to run out. And the oil that she had was not going to run out until it started raining on the earth. Well, this woman, this widow lady in Zarephath, she had enough faith to do what he told her to do. She baked that bread for Elijah, and God blessed her by allowing there to be flour and oil for as long as the drought lasted. So God did a miracle in her house. That flour just never ran out. It just kept coming day after day. She always had enough. Well, a little bit further into her life, Elijah was still with her. Maybe a couple of years later, it had been a little while. The Bible doesn't say exactly how long. She faced another trial in her life. Now, she had already faced tragedy before, even though the Bible doesn't tell us a lot about it. We know that she was a widow. That means her husband had died. But now her son became sick, and he got worse and worse, and finally he stopped breathing. So she came to Elijah. And this is what she said to him. Let me get there real quick. You have only come to this place to remind me of my sin and to put my son to death. Now, I don't know who all listening to this has faced tragedy in your life. Maybe you have. But I think that it's very common when someone is facing tragedy to place the blame on someone. You might place the blame on someone else. You might even place the blame on God. You might blame God. You might even blame yourself, thinking it's because of something wrong that you've done. It's because of your sin. You're being punished for your sin. It's very natural to feel that way. The fact is, every single one of us have sinned. And it's because of the sin that we've done that this world is such a broken place. But Jesus said this, and I think this is important to remember. Jesus said that just because someone faces a tragedy, it doesn't mean that they're a worse sinner than everybody else. But this woman, she didn't know what to do. And she brought her son to Elijah, and she was desperate. And Elijah said, give me your son. And Elijah took her son to his room and placed him on the bed that was his and prayed to God. Elijah said, "Calamity has come on this woman who's been providing for me. You have allowed her son to die." This is what he said to God. Calamity, by the way, means disaster. And so Elijah was praying for this boy, and he stretched himself out on the boy and prayed for him. He did this 3 times. That tells me something interesting. We'll talk about this a little bit later. That tells me that the first time he did it, he didn't see a change. And the second time he did it, he prayed, he stretched out on the boy. I don't think he saw a change. Otherwise, why would he have done it a third time? A third time he stretched out on this boy. He prayed for him. He prayed to God. And the third time, God answered his prayer. And God raised this boy back to life. Then he brought the son to his mother and said, "Your son is alive." And the woman said, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth." So this woman, she didn't know what to do when she was facing tragedy. And she was maybe blaming Elijah or blaming God or blaming herself. But God wasn't finished with her. And you also may be going through something in your life where you don't know what to do. Maybe you are blaming God for it. Maybe you blame yourself. But God isn't finished with you yet either. And it's not the end of the story. So keep believing in God. You may have had situations where you have seen God answer your prayers. You may have had other situations where you couldn't see any kind of answer from God. And so you have these unanswered prayers, and that can be very discouraging. But God's not finished with you yet. And God, even if you have faced tragedy in the past, God could still do a miracle in your life. So I want to encourage you, don't stop believing in God and don't stop praying, because God can do really amazing things in your life. Don't give up. Just like Elijah, when he stretched himself out on this boy, not once, not twice, but 3 times, he prayed for this boy. He didn't see an answer right away, but he kept praying. And on the 3rd time, that's when God raised this boy back to life. So don't be afraid and don't give up, because whatever you're praying for in your life, if you don't give up, you may see a miracle happen in your life too. And it can be very awesome, something maybe that's beyond your expectations. Also want to encourage you to do one thing for me. This goes for kids that are watching, or even adults, if adults are watching this. Doesn't matter who you are. This is something that anybody can do. And this is something that I felt like God was leading me to do years ago, and it really became a blessing in my life. When I was discouraged, I felt like I should start writing down the blessings that came from God. Not only the blessings, but the answers to prayer. So whenever I saw God answer a prayer, I would write it down in my journal. And then if I was ever discouraged, I would go to my prayer journal and I would read over the things that God had done in my life. And it was very encouraging because I could see that God was working in my life. And we tend to forget that sometimes when we're going through tragedy or when we're going through difficulties. Sometimes we forget all the ways that God has blessed us. So start writing them down. This week, I challenge you, write down at least one thing that God has done in your life, some prayer that he's answered, some way that he's blessed you. Start writing it down. And then if you ever feel discouraged, look back on those things and remember that God is working in your life and he's not finished with you.